How are you guys feeling? Great. So, welcome and good morning everyone, and welcome to the Eritrean Transnational Repression Summit. It's a true honor to stand before you today among distinguished barristers, directors of human rights organizations, academics, campaigners, representatives of parliament, journalists, and our justice-seeking Eritrean community, and especially members of Brigade ንሓመዱ. This summit reflects years of tireless advocacy. Despite 87 formal submissions from Eritreans in the UK, our voices have not been included in the key parliament inquiry yet, because we have good news later on that I'll be able to share with you guys. But today we begin to change that by centering those who have been ignored and by building new alliances rooted in justice, truth, and accountability. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully share I recently met with the Secretary to the Chair of Joint Committee on Human Rights, Lord Alton. They are aware of today's program and they have expressed their interest in its outcomes. We deeply appreciate their openness and hope the summit contributes meaningfully to the broader conversation in the Parliament and beyond. A special welcome goes to our guest speakers from Norway and Sweden, whose presence reminds us that transnational repression knows no boundaries, and neither does our solidarity. Now, allow me to honor a group whose courageously and clarity of purpose has been nothing but short of heroic, Brigade ንሓመዱ, often referred to as the front defenders of justice. These individuals have risked their safety, reputation, and peace of mind to expose the reality of transnational repression here in the UK and around the world. While others stayed silent, they stood firm, organized, peacefully protest, protecting their communities and demanding accountability for those who abuse power across the border. Their work is a living testament to what it means to stand for dignity and justice, not just for Eritreans, but all people threatened by authoritarian rule. Today's summit would not exist without them, and they continue to inspire growing movement. We also warmly welcome barristers from Temple Garden, Bath St. Andrew and Doughty Street Chambers, directors from Fair Square and the Foreign Policy Centre, human rights organizations, including Human Rights Solidarity UK, Safeguard Defenders, academic experts from Lancaster University and the Richard Institution, chambers from the NCRI and Hong Kong democracy groups, representatives of UK Parliament, media colleagues from The Guardian, BBC, Eripm, betna, and Desktop Media. And our Eritrean youth group and diplomatic representative from Plan A, the diplomatic arm of the Blue Revolution. Let this be a day of connection, collaboration, and renewed moment in the fight for justice and accountability. Welcome, and thank you for being here. And now I invite you to join us in watching a short documentary that captures the lived reality of Eritrea transnational repression through the voices, struggles, and resilience of those who had stood in the front line. This film sets a tone for our discussion today. It honors the courage of our community and reminds us why this work matters deeply, urgently, and globally. Please enjoy the documentary. Thank you. Thank you.
Eritrea is often described as Africa's North Korea. It's been ruled by one man, Isaias Afwerki, since 1991, when it won a war of independence from Ethiopia. There are no national elections, no parliament, no independent judiciary, no free press. Amid ongoing conflict with Ethiopia, the president imposed mandatory national service for all Eritreans.
It's not our own making. It's not been our own choice. We never wanted to go this way, but it's been imposed upon us, and we have to survive and live with it. It's not a question of national service or avoiding the national service. You aspire to become someone in this society and have good quality life. You work for that. You don't get it free. People learn it either the easy way or the hard way.
Critics accuse the regime of locking up anyone who opposes it, anyone who tries to flee the country, and anyone who avoids conscription. The president has always publicly denied those charges.
Thank you very much for watching. And next, I would love to invite Sengal Zaid, the chair of Plan A, and he will be speaking on the role of Plan A defending transnational repression and insight into the diplomatic strategy and mission of Plan A in countering state-sponsored threats. Please help me welcome Sengal Zaid to the stage. Thank you.
Right. Good morning, everyone. You can listen to me. We don't need the microphone. Right. It's better, Marcus. Dear representative of the Inquiry Committee for Transnational Repression, Lord Burton, dear Police Commissioner, Mr. Chris, dear distinguished guests and participants, and thank you, Mary, for coordinating this special and crucial meeting alongside with the Python. I would like to begin by expressing my sincere gratitude for your presence here today and listening to us. My name is Sengal Zaid, and I'm here to represent Plan A Blue Revolution. I'm just going to highlight what is the role of the Plan A Blue Revolution on defending the Eritrean community against the transnational repression. Plan A Blue Revolution, this is a volunteer group consisting of dedicated activists who advocate for democracy and a rule of law in Eritrea for so long. Also, people who are educated that they can help the struggle strategically, technically against the brutal regime in Eritrea. Plan A Blue Revolution is a diverse and inclusive to all organizations from different perspectives of ideology. Our main objective is to cancel events organized by the regime, legally reporting to police, local MPs, because these events are the source of funds, propaganda, hatred, and division among the community. Since Blue Revolution started in 2022, Plan A was able to cancel 15 events. And the second important objective of the Blue Revolution Plan A is to defend our community from transnational repression by the regime and its supporters. Let me highlight the methods used by the regime for transnational repression and the evidence available, but unfortunately we ran out of time at the moment, so just only gonna read the statement, but the videos might be going to media outlets later. Eritreans living abroad, including those in rest of state benefits, are required to pay 2% diaspora taxing. This is obligatory tax. Is enforced through measures that result in social inclusion, exclusion, threats against family members, and denial of consular service for those who don't comply. The Eritrean government employs various methods to collect this tax from citizens abroad, while host countries such as the United Kingdom have yet to issue a formal resolution on this matter, thus allowing these practices to continue. In recent time, friend who worked a taxi driver had been asked for Wolverhampton council tax to get a criminal record check for the Eritrean embassy. He asked them before he arrived to UK to give him his criminal record check. And he found them, the embassy told him to pay 2% tax or he can't get the service. Otherwise, there is no service for him. Then he made them for his proof. They didn't respond, so he cannot get the service because he didn't get the 2% tax levy. That's the situation is what the Eritrean embassy is doing here in the UK. And the Eritrean government uses its diplomatic presence in the host countries to supervise members of diaspora, consular staff, and the embassy officials engage in activities during basic service, often promoting adherence to regime policies. Members of the diaspora are encouraged to support the government by consular staff and their agencies, who are selected from loyalists. Non-compliance may result in exclusion, different interactions with their home countries, and the use of essential consular service. The Eritrean authorities use 4 months and diaspora associations to monitor Eritreans abroad. Often coordinated through embassies, those who dissent may face harassment, detention, including when traveling to Eritrea. This surveillance aims to discourage return of Eritreans to visit their home country. The Eritrean government utilizes heritage festivals as a means to monitor and control the diaspora, collect funds, and disseminate information. Participants are encouraged to display loyalty, while those who dissent are labeled as enemies of the state, leading to repression and spread hatred among the Eritrean community in diaspora. Opposition groups often face criticism and accusations of betrayal by the regime and its loyalists, promoting them to protest these festivals and events, which occasionally result in violent demonstrations due to the clash between the regime supporters and the just seekers. Young Eritreans frequently encounter confrontations in their daily lives due to intimidation by regime loyalists known as the False Front, Irregular, many more. These primary groups are established within the European territories and pose threats of community events or social activities, but are the tactical means of transnational repression, extend on the citizens abroad, and often cause violent confrontations. The regime motivates such confrontations and spreading and repeatedly cherishing these activities as a means of defending their country. Last year, on the regime's Independence Day, the president publicly said on state TV, "Congratulations, those who are fighting for him in diaspora," and encourages them to continue. That could be seen on the national TV on May 24, 2024. This motivation is made the just seekers to be targeted by such regime loyalists and ambushed, suddenly beaten, tortured, even killed while living abroad. For example, in Israel alone, at least 7 just seekers have been killed when they attacked suddenly, while more have been attacked all over the world, including UK. When they gathered for a festival event, it was reportedly seen they had been armed with sticks, stone, even fire guns, especially in Israel, that had been seen to shoot at the just seekers during the violent demonstrations last year. These guns were suspected to be sponsored by the embassies in Israel. as you might see on the documentary that they show the gun just pointing out to the just seekers. The Eritrean Orthodox Church has been under the control of the Eritrean government since Patriarch Abuna Antonius was detained in January 2007. He served as a leader consecrated in 2004, but was removed due to his opposition to government involvements and placed under house arrest until his death in 2022 without formal charges or trial. Also, St. Eritrean Orthodox Church of Eritrea in Liverpool is experiencing tension in its priest, Father Teklaharte, acknowledged Abuna Antonius during Mass, causing dissatisfaction among individuals who support the government. On December 25, 2021, Father Harte was reportedly kidnapped and threatened by people suspected of having connection with the Eritrean embassy in London. This can be seen on the local newspaper on Liverpool, which is called Echo. Additional information can be found on the Echo News from December 29, 2021. A similar event occurred in January 2023 in Manchester. That's where I live, and I'm a member of this situation as well. So, where the priest loyal to the government denied access to the opposition groups to use the church service because we oppose the government interference with the church, and the priest alongside with other government supporters, they denied us service. So we have to leave the church and we have to get our own church, to get a service. There is an evidence available for this one as well. Due to the time short, I'm going to skip on this one. It happened most of this in the UK as well, especially on the church. So the people who don't support the government, they have to be excluded from the service, and they can't get any service. So in response to these organized attacks on just seekers, Black April Revolution are engaged with the police, local embassies, to address the issue of transnational repression. In February this year, when the UK government announced there is an inquiry committee for transnational repression, we urged the Eritrean community to submit their witness statement with the big hope that this is an opportunity for us to stop threats and repression by the authoritarian regime here in the UK. We aware our community the deadline for the submission, and the report we got how many people they submitted for this witness statement from the major cities in the UK are 87 applications being submitted. And we really hope this will have an impact on the authoritarian regime. And our third objective on the Plan A Blue Revolution is to help the grassroots movement to achieve the goals for a rule of law and democracy, and also to build a state where human rights is well respected. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Speakers, I'm going to start with marching plot. Who here hasn't have heard of marching plot except Salam? Sorry. Okay, Salam, obviously. Okay. Martin Platt is going to speak. Obviously, you've got the seminar papers on the global spread of Eritrean transnational repression. We are very delighted to welcome Martin Platt, a globally renowned journalist and researcher whose courageous reporting has shaped how the world understands authoritarianism in the Horn of Africa, a true friend of Eritrean people. We are very, very, very happy that you are joining us today, Martin. Obviously, as everyone knows, Martin remains deeply engaged with the current developments in the Eritrean community, supporting justice seekers across the diaspora. We are honored to have him with us today. Please help me welcome Martin to the stage. Thank you. And we've got you again. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor to be with you all. And I just want to begin by remembering someone who got me involved in all of this when he walked into my office, which was not very far down the road here in the Labour Party. It was Eripm, a young man, better known as Papaya, who walked into my office and said, "You," and I was working for the BBC, for the Labour Party as the Africa Secretary, said, "You must come to my country." And I said, "Nobody's ever invited me to come to a civil war before." And I said, "You sure?" And he said, "Yes, you come, you get to Port Sudan, we'll look after you." Ever since then, I've been involved. This was many, many years ago. I think it was the 1980s. And it was an honor to meet him. And I remember him now because he was one of the first people to be arrested without trial. He's been in detention ever since. Accused of all sorts of things, but never put on before a court. And if you're not put up before a court, you are an innocent person. So, I mean, it's an absolute tragedy that he's been treated this way. Anyway, I want to really only tackle two elements here. We've heard about transnational repression, what it's done to individuals. What I want to do is look at two specific issues. The first I'd like to look at is, what does the British government know about this? What evidence has it had that it did or didn't act upon? And the second issue I want to talk about is the situation in Germany, where there was the raid in March, where members of the brigade were picked up, arrested by the federal police, and are still in detention, as far as I know, facing really serious charges of being involved in violence and being accused of being the perpetrators of the problems that face the German people and being perpetrators of violence. And I would like to look at those two issues very briefly. I need my spectacles. I am getting older. The first question, what does it, and I would just say that all of this comes against a very serious background. Two events have happened. The first is that President Trump has now agreed to deport people from America to Libya. Imagine refugees being sent to Libya, where we know for a fact that they are not only tortured, but are actually bought and sold as slaves. Today, we have evidence, first-hand evidence. That is the first thing that's happening. The second one is the situation of the brigade people who are in Germany, which I think is so serious. I mean, to hold people under those charges, facing them, when I think the evidence is a real problem. But that is the background. Let me first deal with what the British government knows about this. And I would go back a few years, if I may. In 2011, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 2023. It came with the background of the Eritrean support for Al-Shabaab, financially and militarily. And one of the ways that the resolution attempted to deal with this was by tackling the 2% tax, which is imposed on all members of the diaspora. And the Council discussed the issue at the Security Council and passed this resolution 2023. You're welcome to go and have a look at it. It says, the Council condemns Eritrea's use of the diaspora tax on the Eritrean diaspora to destabilize the Horn of Africa region and to violate the sanctions regime, including by procuring arms and related materials for transfer to armed groups, and decided that Eritrea shall cease these practices. It further decided that Eritrea shall stop using extortion, threats of violence, fraud and other illicit means to collect taxes outside of Eritrea from its nationals or other individuals of Eritrean descent. That resolution was in 2011, and it was passed. Mark Lyle Grant, who is the UN ambassador from Britain to the UN, spoke in favour of it. So it was passed. And when it was passed, there was then an exchange in Parliament, in our Parliament, just down the road. 24th February 2014. Lord Alf Dubs, who is a wonderful supporter of human rights, asked, and Baroness Hayter of Kentish Town, both asked questions of the government. What are you going to do to implement this? And Baroness Warsi, speaking on behalf of the government, got up and said the following. UK supports the UN Security Council Resolution 2023, which condemns Eritrea's use of the diaspora tax and called on Eritrea to cease using illicit means to collect the tax. She then went on to say, on the 8th of November 2013, officials from the Foreign Office, the National Crime Agency and West Yorkshire Police met members of the Eritrean diaspora to discuss the diaspora tax. At this meeting, Eritreans were urged to report any use of coercion and other illicit means to collect the tax from the police. We will continue to engage with the diaspora on this issue. Now, bearing this in mind, Eritreans in London, including Salam, went and organised to collect the evidence. We got an Eritrean to go into the embassy and to ask how he could get papers which he needed to live here. And he was told explicitly that he had to pay the 2% tax, and it was all laid out for him, forms were given, it was there. There was no doubt about this whatsoever. It was recorded, we had him mic'd up, and there was a video recording. We had it all on tape. So with the evidence, we thought, well, we've been asked by the minister to take this to the police. And that's exactly what we did. I was with them, and we went to the police station, and we explained what they did, and we handed this in. And it was a slightly farcical situation, since the policeman hadn't the faintest idea what we were talking about. I mean, why should he? He's used to people being drunk or being beaten up or, assaulted. He's not used to people coming in saying, we have been asked to pay money. Well, not me, but, the Eritreans have been asked. But we said, all we want to do is to hand over the evidence to you, as we have been asked. We presented him with the transcript of Hansard, the recording of Parliament, printed recording, and we said, this is what we want you to do. We want you to take this to the appropriate authorities. And we gave a letter to the station commander. We described all of this. And what was so sad was that this happened in 2013. We gave it all the evidence, and I'm afraid the result was zero. I mean, absolutely nothing. We got finally, 2 years later, we got a response which said, at this time, I'm satisfied, this from a senior police commander, the inspector of the North Sector. He said that no criminal offences have taken place under English law, despite being asked to give the evidence to the government in Parliament. Says, the UN resolution is an instrument of international law. It imposes obligations on countries, not individuals. We went to the embassy represents the country. Only if the country concerned translates it into local law does it become locally enforceable. In other words, if Britain had taken the resolution, brought a law before Parliament which made it illegal, then it would have been law and could be enforceable. Signing it in the UN Security Council, voting in favour of it, was not enough. So in fact, the advice that we had been given, I had been given, but Lord Dubs and Baroness Hayter had been given in Parliament was entirely inaccurate. It was wrong. Giving them evidence did absolutely nothing. So there was a complete disjuncture between what people who got up and said in Parliament that should happen, and voted in the UN Security Council, and the actual action of the police, because the police had no powers, because no law, no enforcement mechanism had been brought in to actually do anything about it. And quite frankly, I was horrified that the British government would behave this way, that they pass things, you know, for goodness sake, the UN Security Council was partly founded by the British government. You know, we've been a member of the Security Council since its very inception, and not to take its ruling seriously was, I thought, disgraceful. So all I'm saying in this is that ever since then, since 2013, they have known officially and have had the evidence. Let's assume they knew nothing about it until then, which I don't believe. But even assuming that they knew nothing about it then, for more than a decade they have had the evidence, they have known what it was. They knew what the pressure was that the community was facing. So I don't think that the government has a leg to stand on if they now turn around and say, well, goodness me, this is a surprise. I just think it's not plausible. The other thing I wanted to relate to was the security authorities in Germany, what they have done, and the 17 defendants who have been accused of being founding or being members of a domestic terrorist organization. And, I mean, obviously, I have no idea what evidence the German authorities have. I think that it is, from what I have known of the brigade, it seems to me pretty unlikely. But, you know, they must bring forward the evidence if they really want to act on it. As of now, I would say these people must be presumed innocent, and that's given every assistance in fighting their cases. And the only thing I would say to the German authorities, and I actually happen to be a German citizen as well, the only thing I would say to the German authorities is this. If you look at the people who are now in Brigade Nahmadu, they are doing two things. One, they are organizing in the diaspora. Members of the community here who sit in front of us are doing exactly that. But they have another aim, which they are also completely open about. And that is that they are determined to end the dictatorship in Eritrea itself. They've made no bones about that. And are prepared to go to Ethiopia. There was a conference in Ethiopia earlier this year, which Brigade Nahmadu had, and they went up to the Afar region. They met Afars there, and they are open in saying that they are prepared to use every means to end the dictatorship. Now that must include armed struggle eventually. I have no idea what the plans of Brigade are, but that could certainly be one possibility. And in understanding this, I think that we here in Britain and people in Germany don't need to look very far to remember what it is that they are doing. Earlier this week, in fact yesterday, we had commemorations of the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. Very, very moving ceremony. People honoured for standing up for their rights, for fighting for justice, for fighting against fascism, for fighting against repression. That was commemorated in this city, in Buckingham Palace, in the government, across the nation. And if we have to ask ourselves, what is it that the people of Eritrea are now facing? I would argue that they are facing, although not as dangerous an enemy for the whole world, certainly a government which is as repressive as anything that took place in Germany, leaving aside the actual Holocaust. I'm not suggesting that Isaias invoked that, but the deaths of all the people, the denial of human rights, the denial of freedom of expression, the denial of parliamentary democracy, no justice, is absolute repression, and there is no legitimate means. There is no legitimate means for Eritreans to challenge except to, in the end, take up arms. And if we want to look at an example, we can find one in this city. And I would suggest that anybody wanting to find it need go no further than 64 Baker Street, just up the road from here. And at 64 Baker Street was the headquarters of the Special Operations Executive. The SOE trained, armed, and sent operatives into Germany, into France, into the whole of Europe to fight for freedom. There's the famous phrase which Churchill used, that he launched them to set Europe alight. He didn't make any bones about what he was doing. You only need to think of somebody like Walter Freud, who was the grandson of the psychologist Sigmund Freud. He fled to England to avoid Nazi persecution at the start of the Second World War, and after the fall of France in 1940, he was briefly interned and sent to Australia. He returned to England in August 1941 and joined the British Army and was recruited to SOE in 1943. In spring 1945, he was parachuted into Austria with a mission to encourage anti-Nazi resistance, commit acts of sabotage, and to establish a British presence before the Russian advance into the area. There was an error during the parachute drop. He was separated from his comrades, the supplies and communication equipment. After weeks alone in the mountains, he managed to bluff his way into the strategically important Zeltweg airfield, and posing as a representative of the advancing British Army, he convinced the commander to surrender to Allied forces. It was quite a story. He was one of 3,000 people who the British government trained, armed, and sent into Europe to fight. So Britain knows what happens when you have a dictatorship. They didn't just send an army, they armed, trained, and sent people to go into a country to fight for their rights. And I would argue that while in Europe, where there are democracies, of course Brigade Nḥamedu must act within the law and must be held accountable for any violence that is perpetrated by its members or itself, if that happens. And there have been mistakes, let's be honest about it. But if they go to Ethiopia, if they go to the Afar region, if they go into Tigray, and then launch an armed struggle, that is a completely and utterly different thing. And I would suggest that the comparison should be made to those brave men and women who went back to fight on European soil. Britain hasn't forgotten them. Britain remembers them, and we should consider those people who are prepared to go and do this, to die for their own country, in their own country, in the same light. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
What?
Salam Kidana is a highly respected, active Eritrean justice seeker and long-time advocate for the rule of law. Salam has worked tirelessly to address the emotional wound inflicted by the repression and exile, especially among Eritrean families and youth. She's not only a leading voice in mental health, but also a pillar of strength in our community, showing unwavering dedication to the struggle for truth, dignity, and healing. Her active engagement in today's Eritrean human rights work continues to inspire many. We are very thrilled to welcome her. Please help me welcome Dr. Salam. Thank you.
Do I need the mic or?
Yes.
I can use my teacher's voice. Thank you, Mary, and thank you for that amazing welcome, everyone. And I'm blue, very blue, so that you give me credit. Today, I will present my, I don't want to call it research yet, my observations and reflections, not only on the growing academic interest in transnational repression, but also on my personal and our collective interest and our collective experiences, the psychological toll it takes on our communities. The presentation should be titled, Fragmented Unity, Political Contestation, Identity Struggle, and the Psychological Impact in the Eritrean Diaspora. As I said, what I'm sharing with you today is based on my readings and also observations from what has been going on, mainly what has been going on in our online discussions.
Salam Kidana is a highly respected, active Eritrean justice seeker and long-time advocate for the rule of law. Salam has worked tirelessly to address the emotional wound inflicted by the repression and exile, especially among Eritrean families and youth. She's not only a leading voice in mental health, but also a pillar of strength in our community, showing unwavering dedication to the struggle for truth, dignity, and healing. Her active engagement in today's Eritrean human rights work continues to inspire many. We are very thrilled to welcome her. Please help me welcome Dr. Salam. Thank you.
Do I need the mic or?
Yes.
I can use my teacher's voice. Thank you, Mary, and thank you for that amazing welcome, everyone. And I'm blue, very blue. So give me credit. Today, I will present my, I don't want to call it research yet, my observations and reflections, not only on the growing academic interest in transnational repression, but also on my personal and our collective interest and our collective experiences, the psychological toll it takes on our communities. The presentation should be titled, Fragmented Unity, Political Contestation, Identity Struggle, and the Psychological Impact in the Eritrean Diaspora. As I said, what I'm sharing with you today is based on my readings and also observations from what has been going on, mainly what has been going on in our online discussions, and also what has been written and reported about the activities of Brigade Nḥaመዱ. But it's also based on, and I'm glad to have heard the first-hand testimonies of Tasfai and Diakon, which resonates very deeply. I too no longer go to an Eritrean church because of a very similar, in a very different denomination. So it shows the pervasive nature of what's going on. But I will explore. I'll explore it using specifically the cultural festivals that have been the grounds for a lot of the activism that we have seen in recent years. So the Eritrean diaspora was once a model of solidarity. Those of us who grew up in the 1980s, the festivals specifically were our pride. I mean, I grew up in Addis, in Ethiopia, so we had very grainy VHS videos that made their ways, and the Bologna Festival was the highlight of Eritrean solidarity and unity. The unity was, was purposed around Eritrea's independence, Eritrea's nationhood. So it was a very special and a very important thing. And so it's very disheartening to see that what the festivals have come to represent in my lifetime. For this discussion, I have used just to show. I have used different lenses just to show us that this is not okay. Martin has placed it historically, which is a good thing, but just to show us that we do know about what's going on. it's in a different frame, but we do understand it's not something strange that is happening to the Eritrean community. We have known about this for so long. In fact, in literature, Michael Foucault talks about how governments insert their power, or assert their power rather, through norms, cultural rituals, and expectations. So this is in the literature. What the government of Eritrea is actually implementing is something that we do know in social science, at least. I also, yes, transnational repression has been mentioned and talked about quite a lot, but sometimes you see the concepts and you wonder how it applies, but it does apply when you look at it. All you need to do is translate it using the examples of the community that is used. And finally, so in addition to governmentability, which Foucault used to show that rituals and festivals and expectations and norms are also a way that the government asserts its power. Transnational repression, we have mentioned a lot of times already. And then thirdly, I also use Brubaker's notion that tells us that diaspora communities, by nature, are always contested. Particularly, there's contested identity. And again, this is being exploited and explored and has become facilitating of the division and the fragmentation that is taking place. As I said, during the liberation struggle, Eritrean festivals abroad were tools of community building. The diaspora, especially here in Europe, they raised funds, promoted identity, and strengthened support for the independence cause. However, after independence, and particularly post-1993, the nature of these festivals began to shift. They became less about community participation and more about state narratives. Participation was no longer kind of voluntary. It became symbolic gesture of loyalty to the regime. Those who stayed away, like me, were labeled as disloyal, and over time, these festivals evolved into spaces of division. For many of us today, particularly for the many young people that have been highlighted, for many young people today, these gatherings are associated with not celebrations, but tension, fear, and protest, of course. The Eritrean regime maintains its grip through mechanisms that are both visible and invisible. Visibly, we've got the 2% diaspora tax that Martin was talking about. This forces people to choose between connection, economic connection in this case, and moral disobedience. Basically, you're no longer able to say, I don't pay the 2% tax because I have a moral objection to what's going on in Eritrea, because by that moral disobedience, you're labeled as disloyal. And then, of course, you're barred from consular services that you might need. Many of us haven't got the right to go back. Okay, that's the right to send a corpse. If somebody passes away in my family, they will be barred because of my refusal to pay. So body repatriation becomes impossible. If my parents want to bequeath me with something when they pass away, I can't inherit that because I refuse to pay the 2% tax. So that's how insidious it has become, and it's one of the most visible ways of the repression that we suffer. However, surveillance is also very real. The embassy and consulates monitor community activities, as we have seen, churches, community centers, and many other places are monitored, and we have in recent months, we have seen a couple of people, at least one from here from London, that have been arrested as a result of surveillance that has taken place here when they went to visit family. So the surveillance is covered because they plant people, but the impact has been not as covered. Perhaps the most devastating of all is the coercion by proxy, which is the people abroad known for their activism and protests. It has got an impact, or at least a threat of an impact for many of us on the family left behind, on the family back home. So this creates a paralyzing effect of fear. It leads to psychological paralysis, guilt, and internalized repression. And, you know, we're not free even here. So you make you make choices, and the impact is felt, as we've already seen, in churches, in mosques, in community gatherings, in WhatsApp groups, everywhere that Eritreans are. Despite this climate of fear, resistance has emerged, and most visibly through diaspora protests and festivals. From Gießen to Toronto to Tel Aviv, young Eritreans have mobilized. Many of them are recent refugees. However, this activism comes at a cost. Many of these individuals already carry trauma, fleeing indefinite national service, imprisonment for many of them, and also for significant proportion, they have also participated in wars. So protesting even peacefully can trigger, and often does trigger, their trauma. And when violence erupts, like it has in many occasions, the trauma is compounded. For many, resistance is both a necessity and also a cause of further psychological pain. So that is the bit that we all see, the visible bit that we all see, has got an undercurrent that goes for generations, but also across many spheres. So there's a lot that goes on beneath that we need to be aware of, you know, if we are to ever address this with the seriousness that it should. The Eritrean diaspora is not monolithic, so the older generation often, apart from a few like Ayatas and others that have come out to protest against this regime, the older generation often sees the government as the custodian of the hard-won result of the long struggle. The new refugees, however, see the regime as their oppressor. And then you've got the diaspora-born youth who are caught in between. So raised in the host countries, trying to make sense of the contradictory narratives. So this is very clear. It shows you what's so in spite of what appears on the surface, we're very, very, very different. And this needs to be understood. And it's not ethnic divisions, it's religious divisions, although there could be an undercurrent of that. Even intergenerationally, there are fragmentations and divisions. This creates deep generational divides, often even within families. Trust has eroded, communication breaks down, identity, instead of uniting, fragments and creates confusion, alienations, and internal conflicts. The Eritrean identity is no longer a neutral, or is no longer just neutral or even just cultural concept. It is political. Participation in festivals, for instance, paying the taxes, even the use of a flag, which flag you use, all of these have become markers of loyalty or resistance. But there is a growing movement. There's a growing movement among diaspora youth to reclaim Eritrean identity beyond the state control. They're using their own art, their own music, social media, and protest to assert the Eritrean identity, rooted in justice and injustice community and memory, not fear. So this represents as the movement, the Blue Revolution, Brigade, Nḥamedu, and all of that, as uncomfortable as society seems to be with it, it represents a gradual move away from what the state has defined for us. It's very revolutionary. It's a move away from authoritarianism. For many, this is not just political. It's, as Mary was saying earlier on, it's very deeply personal. It's about healing. It's about our own healing. And I think it got lost in, a little bit lost in translation, what Diakon was saying about the very act of testifying is healing. It heals from trauma. Being heard, being taken seriously, being understood is a very healing process. So this process, the process of protesting, the process of being part of a movement, the process of using resistance symbols is deeply personal and very healing. And it's also about defining an Eritrea that is resisting authoritarianism. One of the costs, shall I say, one of the ways that the regime tries to curb on this is through ethnic scapegoating. By ethnic scapegoating, I mean whenever someone protests or is seen as disloyal by the regime exploits a long-standing rift with clients, political, historical, cultural, and dissenters are labeled to hold me because he's a journalist and he has got a radio program, and that barred him into doing that. What he told me was, right? He wasn't given the permission to marry his fiancée, basically. Right? That's the kind of governmentability that I'm talking about. That's the kind of insidious transnational repression that I'm talking about. That is being propagated from the embassies through people that they have implanted. So the intergenerational mistrust adds another layer where younger generations see the younger generations not only do they stop seeing each other as allies, but threats in legacy and legitimacy. So they see each other as threats. So people who should be supporting each other are seeing each other as threats. So you can see the fragmentations widening. This is the psychological price of the repression that we are facing as a community, and it definitely extends beyond Eritrea's borders. However, despite this heavy toll, young Eritreans are building digital communities, organizing protests, and challenging old narratives. They are reclaiming the old Eritrean flag, not as a state symbol, but as a cultural sign of resistance. They're creating spaces of belonging and situations of belonging outside the control of the state. And this is very important, to be Eritrean and not aligned to the regime, to be not a regime loyalist, and being an Eritrean is a very powerful thing. And this is, as I said earlier on, and as Diakon said earlier on, this is a very healing experience. It restores agency to the community. It builds solidarity, and it offers a glimpse of what a post-regime or post-traumatic diaspora might look like, one that resists not just oppression, but also despair and impossibilities. For host communities, inevitably, it has been presenting significant challenges. When violence breaks out in Eritrean festivals, for instance, it often is misunderstood as ethnic conflicts or two groups two equal groups in the diaspora fighting, but it's not. These are political acts. These are political acts, and our protests are against repression. They should be seen as political acts and not the Eritrean community fighting against each other, or two equal groups of Eritreans fighting against each other. Host nations must provide protection, not just from physical violence, but from transnational repression. It means investigating embassy interference, like it was so evidently not done in 2014-15. It also means supporting trauma-informed community care, so trauma-informed commissioning of services, and so on and so forth, and listening to the voices of the dismissed and disruptive people. So if the movement is just labeled disruptive, it will be dismissed, and these voices, these very voices, will be missed. There are broader implications. Eritrea's case is not. Definitely the transnational repression is not new or is not unique to us. From China to Turkey to Iran, we have known transnational repression. It's a growing human rights issue that demands coordinated and combined action. It's about refugee protection. It's about legal reforms in our host communities, host countries, and it's also about identifying and supporting diaspora-led activism. We must treat our diasporas not just as fractured threats, but as as frontline communities in the global fight for freedom, as Martin is saying. So, what should we do? I'll just mention a few recommendations and then conclude. To firstly, the legal frameworks need to be looked at and strengthened. And I'm glad that more and more people are thinking about talking about the inquiry is one element here, and hopefully it will lead into ways or avenues for protecting our diaspora community from surveillance, from coercion, and from state interference. Secondly, the actual focus on healing and building spaces where different diaspora cohorts can come together and see each other and understand and get reacquainted to each other. So we need to be supported to develop these community centers, and I think that's what diaspora was talking about. Community centers, diaspora community centers, refugee community centers need to be freed from the interference of the regime. Thirdly, the youth that are arriving have to be recognized for their efforts in reclaiming identity that resists authoritarian narratives. They are heroes. These are people who are overcoming so many barriers to be seen and heard, resisting authoritarianism and authoritarian narratives. That should be recognized. And finally, the psychological toll should not be ignored, because without an understanding, without the trauma-informed approach to this, we will never be able to build cohesive and sustainable communities. Not in London, not in Stockholm, not in Oslo, particularly in areas where there is sizable communities, with Eritrean communities, without recognizing the traumatic toll of what the regime has done, continues to do in the diaspora. We would never arrive there. We would never get there. The silently suffering Eritrean community is no longer here. This is a new Eritrean diaspora, and the traumatized. Dealing with the traumatic impact is in our interest in the host community or in the older Eritrean generation. By closing, I would like to say that the Eritrean diaspora is a community in pain, but it's also a community in motion. It's fractured, yes, it is, but it's also fighting back, fighting to come together in new and free forms. In the face of fear, people are speaking. In the face of trauma, they are organizing. And in the face of authoritarianism, they are reclaiming dignity. So let us listen to them. Let us support them. Let us remember that, yes, we are fragmented. It's fragmented unity, but it's still unity. And if we support it, it is the beginning of something much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Salam. That was very touching, but at the same time, hopeful for what our community can do and accomplish together. healing is indeed needed, but we are working together to do it, and to do it effortlessly and gracefully, and we only need each other's support to fully heal and come back even stronger. Okay, so on my next invite, the speaker's introduction is Michaela Wrong, a comparative insight on how other authoritarian regimes export repression is going to be the next session. Please join us in welcoming the brilliant Michaela Wrong, a celebrated journalist and author who has stood in solidarity with the Eritreans for many years. Her seminal book, I didn't do it for you. Has anyone have read it before? Raise hands. Okay, great. Remains one of the most insightful works on Eritrea's modern history, and her ongoing work continues to shed light on repression across Africa. In her recent focus on Rwanda's transnational repression, Michaela warns that British authorities underestimate the threat posed by African dictatorships like Eritrea. She is a steadfast ally to Eritrean civil society, and we are grateful for her deep and ongoing engagement with our justice-seeking community. Please help me welcome Michaela to say thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to struggle to equal the eloquence of the previous speakers, who are two old friends, by the way. I first visited Eritrea in 1996, so 5 years after liberation, and it was an amazing time. I'm sure many of you remember that time. I wrote an investment survey for the Financial Times encouraging people to invest in Eritrea. And it was a time where you could almost walk into any minister's office and be welcomed, and I interviewed Isaias. And I came away thinking, that country is going to go against the trend of Africa. It's got a brilliant future ahead of it. And that's what I said in my investment survey. And as we know, that promise has not been fulfilled, and I have gone from being a journalist who was very welcome and was very on good terms with Charlie, and welcome to interview the president, to I'm sure if I apply for a visa I won't be getting it. So now I'm quite rude about the regime, since I have nothing to lose. And I have written 2 books. One is I Didn't Do It For You, sorry, I get my books mixed up sometimes, which is now 20 years old. You can easily buy it on Amazon. I also wrote a novel which was about the arbitration dispute, the border arbitration dispute, because I became very close at one stage to the lawyers. Many of whom were young women, American women, who were working for the Eritrean government. And I also met the lawyers working for the Ethiopian government on that case. And I became very intrigued by how the border was being decided, and how the demarcation, where the border lay, was being agreed. Of course, as we know, that finding was then ignored. So it was a very bittersweet experience, I think, the arbitration experience, and the novel tries to convey that without going into the details. So I invented the names of the places, but if you know Eritrea, you will quickly realize it's a book about Eritrea, and it's called Borderlines. So I wanted to say that more recently I've been writing about Rwanda, and testifying about Rwanda in front of the British Foreign Affairs Committee, because my last book was about Rwanda. There are many similarities between modern Rwanda and modern Eritrea, but I have to tell you that as Eritrean activists, you have it a lot easier than Rwandan activists do, because the Rwandan government is even more frightening and dictatorial and much more ruthless even than the Eritrean government. And that may not be something that you're willing to believe, but it is true the start of my book on Rwanda, which has the title Do Not Disturb, it begins with the strangling in a hotel room in South Africa of the former head of external intelligence of Rwanda, a man called Patrick Karegeya, who had fallen out with his old friend, Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, and had set up an opposition party. He fled the country, like many of the people close, who used to be closest to Paul Kagame. He fled the country. He denounced his own government. He denounced Kagame as a dictator, set up an opposition group, and for that he was followed into exile, monitored, tracked, and eventually assassinated in a hotel room in South Africa. And he is not the only person who has been assassinated abroad. There have been other assassinations and many more failed assassinations, but attempted assassinations. And here in the UK in 2011, the Metropolitan Police went around London delivering Osman letters, Osman warnings, which are warnings in which you are told your life is in danger from your own government, you need to take steps to protect yourself. They're called Osman warnings, and they are an official notification by the British government that you are in danger from your own government. And that was done with 4 exiled activists living in the UK in 2011. The Rwandan government is ruthless about the way it chases people down. And not surprisingly, people in the Rwandan community are very frightened. They don't feel they are safe here. And you talked about the way in which the community, the Eritrean community, is divided according to on generational lines, but also on other lines. That is even more true of the Rwandan diaspora, which is divided between members of the Hutu community and the Tutsi community, but also people who used to be in government and have turned against it, and people who still support the government. And so the embassy, just like the Eritrean embassy does with the community here, the embassy monitors the diaspora community, the Rwandan diaspora community. When there are talks staged, they always make sure there's someone from the embassy in the audience. Often they will prevent those talks taking place because they will contact the venue, the people who control the venue, the academic institution, or the people who own the hall, and they will say to them, "You do realise that you are hosting a genocide denier." So that is the accusation that is launched against anyone who dares to criticise Paul Kagame. That they are told this person denies the existence of the Rwandan genocide. I've been accused routinely of being a genocide denier, something I would never do because as a journalist I reported on the genocide. But that is now a label that is used against me and any critic of Rwanda. So, not understandably, people get quite frightened. They send gate crashers to these events. And then what you see also is on Twitter and other social media campaigns, you see an absolute onslaught, a blitz, a tsunami, a flood of abusive tweets, which supposedly come from ordinary Rwandan citizens. But if you look at the accounts, you'll see that they are only followed by 3 people, 0 people, 5 people, and the account was only just set up and it doesn't have a real name and it doesn't have a real photograph. So these are Rwandan intelligence operatives, Rwandan policemen, who are following people in the diaspora and abusing them, calling them genocide deniers, calling them genocidalists, calling them racist, and threatening them and making death threats and just smearing and harassing them. So in that climate, you can see that anyone who lives here who is Rwandan, who is critical of their government, feels very, very frightened. And also very suspicious of other members of the community because they know that the people they socialise with and anyone who goes to an embassy organised event in particular they know that amongst that group, there will be people who are informing on them to the government. And in fact, at the embassy here, the Rwandan embassy, at a certain stage, there was a swearing and an oathing ceremony, which is when everyone who was in the room, there was a gathering of Rwandan, members of the Rwandan diaspora, was asked to put their hands up and take the oath to the ruling Rwandan Patriotic Front. And that oath involves saying that I swear my loyalty to the Rwandan Patriotic Front, and if I were to betray the movement, I should be beheaded. So it's a very serious oath, and luckily films were taken. This was videoed at the time, and the BBC ended up transmitting this video, because an embassy should not be doing that. The Rwandan Patriotic Front is not the government, it is not the nation, it is a political party. So the embassy should never have been organising that oathing ceremony in the first place. So what you see is there's no division between the nation state, the president, and the Rwandan Patriotic Front. They're all the same thing in Rwanda. So as a writer, of course, well, let me just go back a bit. A lot of what the Rwandan embassy does and the Rwandan government does in the UK is facilitated. And I think it's always worth thinking who is facilitating dictatorial governments in countries like the UK. So firstly, there are PR companies that play this role. And one of the very important things that we have now got in British legislation is, I think it's called the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. And this hasn't had a lot of attention. It is the equivalent in Britain of something called FARA, Foreign Agents Registration Act, in the US. And the Foreign Agents Registration Act, it has now been disbanded by Trump. It has, it no longer exists, surprise, surprise. But it was a great way of working out which PR company, which lobbying firm, which legal chambers worked for foreign government like Rwanda, like Eritrea, like Ethiopia in the States, because those companies were obliged to declare it. Otherwise, they would be in violation of the law, and they risked all sorts of legal penalties or problems with the American authorities. And if you know who you are dealing with as a journalist or as an activist group or as a community, it really strengthens your position. Here, and certain states, here in the UK, this is a new thing. We did not have this legislation, and I cannot emphasise how important it is that this legislation should be taken seriously, and I would like to see them holding people to account, because until they hold the first cases, the first people who don't observe this legislation to account, it will be regarded as a sort of dead letter. At a certain stage, the people like me who criticise Rwanda and who were wondering, where all these abusive tweets came from, describing us as genocide deniers, and where all this pressure, was it just from individuals? Who was behind it all? At a certain stage, we discovered that there was a company called Chelgate, which was a small PR firm based in the City of London, run by a gentleman called Terence Bain Saunders, who has a double-barrel name and wears a bow tie and a very posh voice, and that actually Chelgate had a contract with the Rwandan government, and they were doing PR, and they specialise in something called reputation management. So Chelgate was part of a campaign to attack people like me, other writers who specialise in covering Rwanda, to describe us as genocide deniers, to get hold of people who were proposing to host events that we were going to be speaking at, and to smear us repeatedly and relentlessly on social media platforms. So knowing that was actually a very useful piece of information, and in future we should know those things. In the past, that has been completely hidden from public view. So I think that's a really important change in the UK law, and as I said, I think we need to see the first cases in which companies that are working for foreign governments but haven't declared it are held to account by the British authorities. But then just to go back to who else helps out, what the Rwandans benefit from, and I don't think the Eritreans have anything like this in the same way. I think they used to, but they don't now, is the true believers. You know, the people who have drunk the Kool-Aid, the friends of Rwanda. They are very widespread, because the genocide was a very high-profile event, and it created, not surprisingly, because it was a horrific human rights event, it created a whole community of academics, of writers, of NGO workers, of aid, people who worked in development and aid, who were immensely sympathetic to the new Rwandan authorities in the wake of the genocide. And those people continue to champion Rwanda and to support Paul Kagame and to play a role in making sure that his narrative gets across, and the narrative of people criticising him is censored and silenced. And I think Eritrea used to have that. They used to be friends of Eritrea. I met many of them. I mean, I used to be described like that myself. And I think, you know, the reality of what has happened in Eritrea has been so obvious and so crude that Isaias Afwerki has lost most of those friends in academia, in journalism, in British politics. But Paul Kagame has not lost them, and he is still using those friendships and those alliances. And those people play their role in the articles they write, in the events they hold, in the tweets they send out, in supporting the Rwandan government. So I'll just sort of finish off with saying, what can you do when you are confronted by these kind of authoritarian regimes that really want to control the narrative and tell, you know, and silence all debate and all contestation and all challenge. I think for me, the really interesting thing has been seeing how the audiences, there was a stage where I went to a lot of Eritrean meetings like this one, and all of the heads, and it's no offense because I'm not young myself, but all of the heads would be grey-haired. You know, everyone in the audience was of a certain generation. And young people who were coming to the UK, young Eritreans who were moving to the West, they didn't want to be involved. They didn't want to play a role. This was for the old guys, you know? This was ELF, EPLF, you know, divisions, and they were sick of it, and they left Eritrea because they didn't want to do military service, and they wanted to start new lives. And they didn't want to be involved in politics, they wanted to forge ahead. Now, the Blue Brigade has changed that. And so I'm very cheered. I was actually in Australia and New Zealand last year, and I found myself addressing audiences in both those places of Eritreans, and I said the same thing because it was very cheering to see the young faces in the room and the level of activism. Having said that, I do think you need to be very careful. I think the German example shows you the way, the trap. There's a trap that is opening up in front of the Blue Brigade. And I think, you know, the events in Germany show you that you can fall into that trap really easily. If every event that is associated with the Blue Brigade turns violent, if people routinely are being beaten up and properties are trashed, you know, then it makes it very easy to present the Blue Brigade as being vandals and as being terrorists. And as Salam was explaining, people often simply don't understand the issues. You know, they'll say, you know, oh, ethnic divisions, or you know, two different sections of the diaspora community battling it out. and they won't see it as Democrats confronting a dictatorship. So I think the violence issue is absolutely integral, and the Blue Brigade really needs to be careful not to fall into the trap of being associated every single time with violence. I am a firm believer in raising awareness and in the fact that honesty is the best tool any activist group can have, transparency. So I understand this issue of people not wanting to get their families into trouble back home, and wanting to be able to go back home. But what I have seen with the Rwandan community is that there are a group of Rwandans who just stand up and speak very openly now and very publicly because they have nothing left to lose. And often they're people who have been targeted for assassination themselves, or they know they're not going to be going back to Rwanda, not under that leadership. And so they have taken that on board, and they speak very freely now. And in doing that, they are helping all of their, members of their community back home. So I think, that's a liberating moment, and that's a very empowering moment. I'm hoping to see that there's some action here in Britain on transnational repression, because one of the problems people like me have faced is that we can see that it's not taken seriously by the British authorities and by the British police. When I go and speak in Europe, I have been told, because I have addressed events I've tried to address events which then cancelled on me because they had people going around from the Rwandan embassy saying, if you stage this event, we will break it up. You'll regret it. There have been direct threats made to me in to people staging events or proposing to stage events, including me in South Africa, in Belgium, and in Paris. And in those, and in some of those European locations, the security services have got hold of me and said, if you ever come through here again, feel free, just let us know. And then when I go and talk now, I can see a policeman at the back of the room and another one across the street. And they know what they're dealing with. There's a maturity, they understand what they're dealing with. And we chat at fairly regular intervals. I have never had a member of the British police or British intelligence or British counter-intelligence or British counter-terrorism ever spontaneously contact me to ask me about Rwandan transnational repression. And I do think that's pretty shocking, given what has happened in this country and those 4 Osman letters. So, but for the rest, I just wanted to say, I think that there are certain really common sense things that can be done. When you have meetings, and maybe you're doing this already, but I had to explain to people when I went to talk in Australia and New Zealand, I had to explain to them how to stage a meeting. And I would sort of say, firstly, you don't open it to everyone in the public. You have tickets. You get people to register. You don't need to get them to pay, but you get them to register their names on a form, because that will put off all the people who want to go there and break it up, because they don't want to give their names, they don't want to give their emails, they don't want to give their telephone numbers. And then, you check the tickets when they arrive, and it's as simple as that. And that means you keep out the people who want to create trouble. And then the other thing is denounce. What really shocks me on Twitter is, firstly, why is everyone on Twitter? Why aren't they moving to Blue Sky and places like that? We know how horrible Twitter is now. Have some alternatives. Do Twitter, but also do other platforms. Twitter is a platform that is loved by dictatorships and repressive authoritarian. So don't only be on Twitter. Be on other platforms. But also denounce. When I see, often I will put up a comment on Twitter and I will see 47 people, and 20 of them are clearly trolls, intelligence trolls, or probably being paid for by these PR companies, here in the UK. And so eventually I just sort of do, when I have the time, I just go, you're a government troll, I can see you're a government troll, this is really pathetic, don't you have more followers? How come you only have 2 followers? You know, you're not doing your job very well, you really do better than that. And I do that because a lot of people on Twitter don't understand that when you make a comment and 500 people call you a genocide denier, most of those are employed by the Rwandan government. So denounce, show people what's going on. You know, help people to understand what is happening on these social media platforms, which is systematic manipulation of what is meant to be, you know, an instrument for public debate. This is not public open debate. This is actually manipulated information and attempts at censorship. So try and show it up. You can do that on Twitter. Anyway, so that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. I feel very, very honored to welcome the next speaker, Mr. Finn. We are proud to welcome Mr. Finn, Eritrean educator, chair of the Eritrean committee in Norway, and one of the most committed international allies of the Eritrean people. Finn has long supported Eritrean human rights campaigns, challenging transnational repression in Norway and across Europe. He continued to stand with our community in public, in policy, and in principle. His steadfast friendship and deep knowledge of our current challenge have made him a cherished part of the global Eritrean justice movement. Please help me welcome Mr. Finn to the stage.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm not a politician. I'm an old teacher. Last 14 years. And that was 10 years ago. I ended up my job as a teacher, and I've been active in Norway. When being a teacher, I met Musi, and he was also a teacher, trained in Norway, from Eritrea. And together we started up the Eritrean committee. We worked with the politicians in Stavanger, one of the biggest cities in Norway, the most beautiful city of course. But we come no way. So 5 years of working there was in vain. Then we found out we had to go to Oslo, where the elite is, where the Storting and the government is. Then things started to happen. So, like Martin, I want to have 2 main subjects. Telling about first of all, telling a little about how we have worked in Norway, but then focus on I think that the most important form of transnational repression today is happening through these organizations, associations and churches. And the second point is that the authorities in these countries, in the parliament, in the government, in UK and Norway, has a great responsibility for this case. They have to make new laws so the police can follow the new laws and stop these things happening. So that is the 2 points. But first, a little back to the situation, how we worked in Norway. So we went to Oslo, yes, and then met representatives from the government and the parliament, Storting, over 5 years. And then we have those two reports ordered by the government in Norway. The first was press and control. I think that was in 20. And then we had the transnational repression report coming in 23. And then we have a very good political, same the neighbor party to Åsa's party, the Venstre, the left, or the Liberals. Is that a new party coming up in England? Well, his name was Ola Elvestuen, and he proposed for the government. For the parliament to discuss this case, and it was discussed, and his suggestion, his proposal went through, surprisingly, ordering the government to stop transnational repression of Eritreans and all other groups that was oppressed in Norway. Especially after that happened, especially after the Blue Brigade had this big fight in one other city in Norway, Bergen. You know, you have done a great job with all the press information we have got. And that happened also in Norway, so everybody knows about this fight. All Bergen city was closed down and helicopters, a lot of police. And so I think that it was made the main driver for this proposal to go through. Well, our government has had this order from the parliament on its table for 1 year. Stop transnational repression, find action plan, or find actions to stop this repression. They talk about dialogue, starting dialogue groups. Dialogue groups, and we have Dag here. He is a dialogue specialist in Trondheim. And we are happy to be here to learn a lot of what's happening here. But as I told you, the government has still not implemented any measures. Therefore, we must continue to put pressure on the government to carry out the task given to them by the people in power. You know, the parliament in Norway is special made because all power is in the parliament. It's not divided into two sections like in America and England. So 21% of the parliament have the power, and they ordered the government to stop this transnational repression. But they haven't done that yet. But there is election now in October, so maybe we will have a new government. So we can press on. No, it's a very good time to press on to the government. Something about the definition of transnational repression. In this last report, transnational repression, there is a definition, and it says that transnational repression is repression against diaspora carried out or initiated by a foreign power. The word initiated, initiated, you can. It's very important, but because then it's including Proxa group and we can say that the transnational repression is repression against the Eritrean diaspora, ordered by President Araki, but carried out here in England by his cadres or assistants or whatever you call them, by using regime-loyal organizations. And that is very important for me to stress. Of course, there is a single person like Rwandas and also by, of course, by the Eritreans that are attacked personally. But I think that the main repression is happening through these organizations. So in every big city in Norway, the regime-loyal people have managed to divide the community into two, as you talked a lot about. And we have, for instance, in Stavanger, Oslo, Trondheim, Bergen, we have two Orthodox churches, one for the loyal regime and one for the critical. We have two associations, and we have even two Tigrinya schools, one for the children coming from, with parents from regime loyal families, and another school for regime critical. And I think I just have a look on the congregation on the Orthodox Church in London, and it was very quick to find out that two of them are very close to the regime. One, I don't know, but it looks like that was free from the regime. And I think that's important for you to find out. What are they doing? How are they associated? You know, in England, as in Norway, they do a lot of good things in these associations, social, sports and things like that. But if you go further down, you find out that this is actually, they are working for the regime. So they cheat. They don't talk true all the time. Therefore, let me see how long. Concerning Eritreans living in Norway, we have experienced that the most important form for transnational, as I told you, is carried out through association and churches. Isaias Afwerki and PFDG has built up a hidden system in the diaspora. It's come from Eritrea. It is built on leaders of regime-loyal association and churches. On behalf of the dictator, they carried out the most important form for transnational repression. And they are in contact with the ambassador, and maybe also with more secret people coming from Eritrea. And in Norway we have got a new law last year saying that if a group press the usual discussion, press them to say what they actually don't want to say, it's illegal, so they can be fined for 3 years. Okay. this form of transnational repression consists of, they start with infiltrating, dividing and controlling the diaspora, so that the diaspora pay taxes, remain silent, and participate in regime-loyal events. In return, they are rewarded, you know everything about this, while those who resist face social exclusion. You know, one of, you told it in the beginning here, and I have a similar story, when my friend Lucy was on television as the first protesters of the regime, national television. He was covered in a way, but they didn't cover his voice. So the next day, his children were thrown out of the game, and they have since never played with Eritrean children in Norway, and that has a very impact on their lives. They have had very difficult lives, and I think that's because this division. I think I have some for music. Next minutes. The Norwegian government claims it's difficult to persecute offenders because those carrying out transnational repression, the government say they don't live in Norway, they are abroad, so we can't catch them. But we, as I told you, transnational repression is in these big organizations, associations, churches. So they are in our countries, they are in Norway, and they have a double agenda, or they hide what they actually are doing. But you know, when they start out infiltrating, and then as I told you, they split the church, they split the association, they are not normal. These organizations are suddenly only for regime loyal people. So they close the door for festivals, for the yeah. I think I have to talk a little about authorities, our responsibility, responsible to expose regime legal organization, ensure that diaspora Eritreans can live their life free and safe as everybody else in England or UK and Norway, Sweden. So we are supposed, and maybe that's the most important task for the politicians, to let the people in the country live free lives, and that's not the case for the Eritreans. Therefore, we have to put our fingers on those who are representing us in parliaments and governments. It's the government's responsibility in Norway and UK to expose that regime-loyal organizations are acting on behalf of that was wrong. So I and you, it's not our job to expose those people. It's the police, it's the politicians. They must start investigation. So as you told Martin, you had a lot of proofs, but the politicians did nothing. Therefore, we must become far more politically active. So maybe the Blue Brigade, you have done a fantastic job all over the world, from Australia, America, Canada to EU and Stavanger. to bring this forth. Everybody knows about it. But now I think you must turn a little your path and be more political. You live in a democracy and you have to follow the rules of the democracy. And one of the most important rules is to put pressure, to go on the politicians, go to the politicians, ask them for meetings, and tell them what's actually happening. So I think it's wonderful to hear. In January this year, there was that the Parliament was going in England, in UK, was going to have an inquiry on transnational repression. This is an opportunity for the Blue Brigade to find the right persons. I know those Martin and they know about the right person to contact. But you must be active. So instead of put a lot of pressure on stopping festivals, you must put the pressure on the politicians. So to end this story, how do we defeat Averki and his organization in Norway, Sweden and UK? Well, the Blue Brigade have lifted, as I told you, information of the Eritreans and transnational repression by the fights and press info. But now it's time to fight and wake up Prime Minister in England and Norway and the governments to make them stop this ugly thing happening in the Western countries. How can we help our country governments to stop transnational repression? In other words, how can we stop regime-loyal organizations that are acting on behalf of the Eritrean regime? We need to find proofs. You must help the police to find proof. And they are saying, we are ordinary organization, but you and we and I must prove what I ever know. Go to the police, say that's not true. For instance, you know the video coming from the young PFTA many years ago to London, Oslo and all over Europe. The leaders in Stavanger said, this is just an ordinary party for young people from Eritrea. But then we suddenly found out, no, this is a part, one important part of the young PFTG organization. The left, the wing young party of PFTG. So he was lying. That's a proof. And we must take them on their lies and not accept it. And then we have to collaborate internationally. Come to Norway, we will come. We come to you, you must come to Norway and Sweden. But, you know, Blue Brigade, you are young, young, fine persons. But I think it's important to talk to the old people as well. And to, for instance, Martin Plaut, or to politicians, to learn about how do you make a democracy, how do you respect the laws of the country. You must stop fighting now with sticks and stones. Don't return when the festival people start throwing stones and you don't throw back. Okay, put your pressure into the politicians in England and UK. There are also, we just started out, not we, but suddenly there come a new research starting up in Norway. They had they got 70 million, that's 7 million Norwegian crown. That's 7 million pound to study repression towards Eritrea through 3 years. That's professional, like Salam here. And they are cooperating, they're trying to cooperate with Sweden as well to see what's like and what is different. And maybe you should start, join the group. But how to stop the Isaias Afwerki? We must make a list. And Åsa, she has already in the Liberal Party made this good list. So maybe we can talk more together how to stop Isaias Afwerki, how to stop these. I think we can't stop these regime legal organizations, but we have to force them into the light. So they must accept, okay, we are organizations loyal to the dictator in Eritrea, and they can carry on with that view in Norway. But we have to bring them into the light and make them show their real face. Okay, good luck further on. Thank you for...
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you so much, Ben. Last but not least, as they say, I'm very delighted to welcome our good friend Åsa Nilsson to the stage. But with Åsa, I want to tell a story. So me and my best friend who lives in Sweden, I think she has been working with Åsa for quite some time. And I remember at the first time I saw her picture and I said, oh, she looks lovely. And she told me, oh my God, Mary, if you know about her, you'll love her more. And then by the time I learned a lot about the activities she does within our community, we always argue whose most favorite she is. So that's an argument for another day. But we are truly honored freedom and justice. Please help me welcome the amazing Åsa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure how I can respond to that. These very kind words. Do you still have the energy to sit for another 15 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to change my glasses because I'm also getting quite old. So, dear friends, dear fellow activists, thank you for the honor of speaking here today. I'm deeply humbled to be here with all these courageous individuals and with Martin Plaut, who I've read so much from, and Salam has done so much important studying on the situation. Today I want to talk about the transnational repression we are experiencing in Sweden and how we are trying to counter it. And I also want to share with you what I see as the most efficient methods to counter the influence of dictatorial regimes in democratic countries, so that we can learn from each other and work together to build safer societies. Because in a democratic country like Sweden or England, it should be the safe place for all citizens, regardless of where you come from. So why do we see transnational repression happening all over Europe? First of all, it's really a pleasure to talk in an audience where I don't have to explain what is transnational repression, because that's usually what I have to start with. Well, all of you know it a lot better than me because you have lived it. I have only read about it and heard about it. I will not tell you what transnational repression is, but it has actually received a growing attention in recent years. I think that's a good start. Now we see Freedom House, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, they're all writing reports on transnational repression. And that's great, because that's the first. first step to bring it up on the political agenda. Yeah, I jumped around in my speech here. But we should know that even though it's getting more and more interest these days, it's not a new phenomenon. This happened also during the Second World War, which Martin Cloud was referring to. At that time, the Nazi Germany would send their spies to Sweden to control what Germans living in Sweden did. The same way that Isaias Afewerki is now sending his spies to Sweden to control what the Eritrean diaspora does. And the Eritreans living in Sweden knows this. This has happened for decades already. And for me, it is clear why this is happening. In my past, I used to work a lot with supporting civil society in dictatorial regimes. And I see it when an authoritarian regime starts cracking down on you. It's because they know that you are making a difference. They are afraid of the three voices in exile because these voices can make them weaker at home. They fear the strong oppositional voices, and that's why they're trying to silence you, because you're important and because you can make a difference. I think we need to remember this. So, what does it look like in Sweden? I think maybe the situation in Sweden is worse than here, but I'm not 100% sure. But from my local perspective, I live in the Järva district of Stockholm. It's about 100,000 inhabitants in the northwest of Stockholm. And only over the past year, last summer, a young guy was stabbed in a barbershop with the scissors. Fortunately, he survived, and he's doing well now. And a few months later, there was an Iranian community office that was burnt down. And we also have the Chinese shadow embassy continuously harassing the Chinese people in the area and in all over Stockholm. So these are, of course, quite serious things when you get stabbed or you burn down something. But it's also important that we talk what Salam talked about, that the everyday harassment, the subtle threats, the surveillance, like people always knowing, I know where you work, I know when you leave, just to keep you frightened, because that creates a lot of fear in the environment and it causes a lot of psychological harm. In Sweden, it's not only the Eritreans who are affected. We have the Chinese, we have the Russians, we have the Iranians, Kurds, Syrians. Many groups are subject to transnational repression. But what makes Eritrea stand out, I think it's three different characteristics. The first one is the very deep history between Sweden and Eritrea. Sweden had a lot of missionaries in Eritrea, and I recently learned that one of them actually made the first translation of the Bible from Latin to Tigrinya. And the same way the Eritrean regime is deeply rooted in Sweden. Many have been there for decades, and they have been smart. They were very clever in working together with the leading party of Sweden. And at that time in Sweden, we were a democracy, but we were almost like a one-party democracy because the Social Democrats were ruling for decade after decade after decade. So that's a strong tie between the PFDJ and the Social Democratic Party in Sweden, and that affects the situation still today. And the second trait is the strong and organized network that many people here talked about. The Eritrean regime has built a powerful network of organizations and churches that support them. And these organizations and churches are the tools of the regime. They are the method they use to do their transnational repression. They control this diaspora, they collect the money, they spread the propaganda. And the propaganda is the third and last point I wanted to point out, that the Eritrean transnational repression is very public. It's a lot of flag waving, a lot of marches, and this we don't see in other communities so much. So every summer there's a huge festival in the north of Stockholm, drawing thousands of people from all over Europe. And we all know it's not a fun festival. It's not a cultural festival. Not only, I mean, it also has those parts. There are some good rides for the kids and there's some singing, but there's also the propaganda. And it's been going on for 27 years now, I believe. There's also similar but smaller events all over the year in different towns in Sweden. Probably you have something in Borås as well. I have a Swedish compatriot here. So what can we do? What can we do to bring the transnational repression to the political agenda? Even if human rights organizations now are talking more and more about it, we still need to do more, because people, and especially decision makers in Europe, need to understand what is happening and understand what many diaspora groups are going through and how it affects their lives and their freedoms. And only with this knowledge they will be interested in making a change. Even in my own party, the Liberals of Sweden, it's a party based on democracy and fighting against dictatorships, but still I have to explain this thing over and over, because politicians are busy. They are busy with everything, with the crimes, with having good schools, and with the environment. There's many challenges out there, so it's difficult to get your topic on the agenda. So one main thing actually is to get involved in the political parties, because it's great that you have the Blue Revolution, you're working together, you're bringing up the issue, but as long as you're just talking to people who already know about the situation, you will not make such a big difference. So my number one tip would be to join a political party and make your voice heard there. That can make a change. So what are we doing? I think if you read the Freedom House report, they say Sweden is a good example of a country who have noted the transnational repression. I don't really agree, because we do have a good view now of what the Iranians and the Russians do, but it's all the time seen as, transnational repression is seen as like a national security issue, not as an issue of protecting the rights and freedoms of people who live in Sweden. And we need to change that view a bit. But I think there's a way, Swedish society is beginning to wake up, and we have seen two big changes now with the current government. In January we had a new law having a very strict democracy criteria, including that an organization who shows support to a dictatorship, or a church who shows support to a dictatorship, should not be eligible for public funding. I think that's something important. It shows that we as a society does not accept this, and it also makes it difficult for the regime-loyal organizations to make their activities. We have also introduced tougher rules for revoking asylum. So if you travel back and forth to Eritrea, but you still claim that you have asylum in Sweden because you fled from the very same dictatorship, well, then you can lose your residency. But 30 years in politics have shown me this. It's, of course, it's a bit difficult to get the law in place, but it's even more difficult to see that the law is implemented. So that's the challenge now. We need to follow up that these laws are actually having the effect that we wanted. So what more can we do? I think that thing that would make the most difference is to close the embassy. I think we should close the Eritrean embassy in Sweden. That's where they collect the 2% tax. That's where they orchestrate what the organizations do. And if we cannot close the embassy, at least we should follow up on the UN resolution and make the 2% tax illegal. And then we should, when somebody is, what do you call it? If somebody hits you in Sweden, of course that's a crime. But if somebody hits you because you are black or because you are homosexual, then it's even a worse crime. I think we should have the same for transnational repression. So if somebody hits you because of hatred and because of a part of transnational repression, it should be seen as an aggravating circumstance. And in the police, we see now when you report a crime, it's usually always seen as one crime, but we need a special unit that actually deals with transnational repression, who can investigate these crimes in a broader view and have a better competence. And what else? We need to strengthen our knowledge. And I'm very happy about the Norwegian initiative, which means that we will, in a few years' time, have a broader view on what the Eritreans in Sweden and Norway are facing. But I would also like to have a transnational, or a center against transnational repression on the national arena. And as it always takes time to get politics through in the national arena, I decided that we should start in Stockholm. And so I put a motion that we want a transnational center. No, not a transnational, sorry. We want a center against transnational repression in Stockholm. And I think it should increase the knowledge, but it should also provide support to people who are facing the transnational repression. We need the judicial support, we need the psychological support. Yeah. So that's what we're doing in Sweden. I hope that will be some kind of inspiration, and I am looking forward to discussion to learn more about what you're doing in the UK. I'm sure there's a lot we can learn from each other. And remember, the reason why we face transnational repression, the reason why the regime is smearing us in social media, it's because we can make a difference. So let's make the difference together.